Hello and welcome to Sax Comprehensive. My name is Ken Gowdy, and in this video we'll look at the concept of voicings for playing in the Altissimo range. So we'll concentrate on how to get the Altissimo notes to sound. There are lots of advice and tips that you can find online that will tell you how to get these Altissimo notes to come out. So before we look at the concept of voicings, let's just go through some of these tips. One of the major tips is to move your lower jaw a little forward. Now, if you move your lower jaw a little forward, that will expose more of the reed inside of your mouth and will allow you to reach these higher partials. So if you move your lower jaw a little forward, you'll be able to sound these Altissimo notes a lot easier. Some teachers may even tell you that if you move your jaw into various positions along the reed, that will give you access to more higher partials and you'll be able to produce more Altissimo notes. Now, while it is true that you can move your jaw forward and it'll be easier to get these Altissimo notes to come out, the disadvantage is that you're going to have to move your jaw. So when you move from the normal register of the saxophone and move into the Altissimo range and back again, you're moving your jaw backwards and forward. Or in some cases, when you're within the Altissimo range, you're moving your jaw into various positions. Now, while lots of people do this because it's easier to sound the Altissimo notes and probably that's the way they're being taught, it is not the only way how you can learn to play the Altissimo notes. Some teachers will tell you that you should not move your jaw forward and that you should keep your jaw in the same position. So when you move from the normal register of the saxophone into the Altissimo range, your embouchure stays the same. And the way you do that is by just concentrating more on your voicings. You've probably seen or heard about this book. It's from Mark Watkins. It's called From the Inside Out. Here, the author takes various saxophone players and records them playing in the Altissimo range. He takes scans of them so he can see what is happening inside of the mouth. And he records in this book that some of the players played within the Altissimo range without moving their jaw forward and without exerting extra force upon the reed. And so it is possible to play in the Altissimo range without moving your jaw forward and without using extra pressure upon the reed. I have read several books on playing in the Altissimo range written by the pioneers, and I've never found a place in those books where they told me to move my lower jaw forward. They all seem to be focused on some aspect of voicings by playing countless overtone exercises. I did read an article which said that if you have to move your lower jaw forward in order to play Altissimo notes, then your embouchure was not correct in the first place. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I'm just simply saying that there is a choice. You can either learn to play Altissimo notes by moving your lower jaw forward. That way will be an easier way because moving your lower jaw forward will help you to get these Altissimo notes to sound. The disadvantage being that every time you play an Altissimo note, you're going to have to move your jaw. The other way to learn to play Altissimo notes is to keep your jaw in the same place, keep your embouchure the same, and just focus and concentrate on voicings. This will be a longer way to learn the Altissimo notes because you're only solely concentrating on voicings. But I think that way may be possibly a better way because when you jump from one register to another, you do not have to move your lower jaw. There are other advice that you can find online. Some people may tell you to buy a certain mouthpiece, maybe a mouthpiece with a smaller chamber or a higher baffle or a larger tip opening. They may tell you to get a stiffer reed to help you play the Altissimo range. They may even tell you to buy a certain brand of saxophone, saying that certain brands of saxophones are better in the Altissimo range than others. They may also tell you that it's all down to your embouchure strength. So they may encourage people not to learn to play in the Altissimo range until they have a good embouchure strength. But as I said before in this book, Mark Watkins mentions that some people played quite well in the Altissimo range without moving their jaw forward and without extra pressure on the reed. And so it's not so much about your embouchure pressure. While there is truth in all of these things are secondary. And like Donald Sinta says in his book, if you concentrate more on the voicings, then all these other things are secondary and you probably can play Altissimo notes without having to do these things. Some people can play Altissimo notes with large tip openings, some can play with smaller tip openings, some can play Altissimo with stiffer reeds, some can play with softer reeds. So it really doesn't matter if you've got a good control of your voicings. So now let's look at what do we mean by voicings. And in order to do that, we need to understand how do we produce sound. And in order to do that, we need to look inside our throat and inside our mouths. The way we create a sound is by expelling air from the lungs, which travels through the larynx or voice box. In the voice box are the vocal folds, which vibrate when air is pushed through them, creating a sound. This sound is amplified by the voice box. The voice box moves up and down naturally to the sounds that we make. If you put your hand over your throat and make a low sound, you will feel the voice box move down, and if you make a higher sound, you will feel the voice box move up. You can also feel the movement when you swallow or yawn. We can control this movement to some extent by mimicking the sensation of sounding a low or high note, or by mimicking the sensation of swallowing or yawning. When a singer wants to sing lower than they normally do, they will train themselves through various vocal exercises to lower their voice box further than normal. If a singer wants to reach higher notes, they will learn how to raise their voice box higher than normal. The air then continues moving and will enter the oral cavity, which is the space in the mouth that the tongue occupies. And depending on the movement of the soft palate, some of that air will move into the nasal passage. The soft palate is the soft part of the roof of the mouth right at the back, which is connected to the uvula, the dangly bit at the back of your mouth. The soft palate will rise the closer the air to the nose, making the sound fully oral, or will open for nasal sounds like the pronunciation of M, N, or NG, as in words ending in ing. We can control whether it opens or closes by vocalizing nasal sounds or not. When a person learns a new language or wants to change their accent, they will learn how to pronounce different sounds, which will involve the movement of the soft palate. As the air travels into the oral cavity, the movement of the tongue changes the shape of the passage of air, which in connection with the movement of the voice box changes the pitch of the sound. The tongue is a flexible organ, and so the movement of the tongue involves movement at the front, middle, and back of the tongue, each being important. The sound then passes through the lips, which further shapes the sound. So to produce a sound, there is a complex and coordinated movement of the voice box, the soft palate, the tongue, and lips. The only reason why we are good at speech is because we have learnt it for many years and the brain remembers these coordinated positions. Now, when we put a saxophone in our mouths, the position of the voice box, soft palate, the tongue, and the pressure of the lips on the reed, together with the saxophone fingerings, produce the pitch. If we change the position of the voice box, the soft palate, or the tongue, we can produce a different pitch with the same fingerings. So to recap, with the concept of voicings, what we're going to do, we're going to put our voice box, our soft palate, and our tongue in a certain position as if we're going to make a certain sound. But instead of making that sound, we're just going to blow through the saxophone with the Altissimo fingerings, and those Altissimo notes will sound because we've got our throat, our soft palate, and our tongue in a particular position. The problem is finding the positions for our throat, our soft palate, and our tongue to make those Altissimo notes sound. There are two ways how you can go about trying to find those positions. You can either take the trial and error method or the long systematic approach. With the trial and error method, what you're going to do, you're going to finger an Altissimo note, and then you're going to move your voice box, your soft palate, and your tongue into various positions by trial and error until you get that Altissimo note to sound. When that Altissimo note sounds, you're going to remember those positions and then move on to the next Altissimo note. So it's all by trial and error. With the long systematic approach, what you're going to do is some vocal exercises to prepare you for when you start playing these Altissimo notes. So you're going to do some mouthpiece exercises, you're going to do some overtone exercises, some undertone exercises, and it's all about developing your vocal muscles so that when it comes time to start fingering these Altissimo notes and trying to find the correct positions, you're better acquainted to find these positions. So let's look at these two approaches, starting with the trial and error method. So the first thing that you want to do is to warm up your saxophone so that you can tune it. So play some long tone exercises or play some warm-up exercises and then get your tuner and see if you're playing in tune. The way you tune your saxophone is to blow a note within the middle of the range of the saxophone with your normal embouchure and check that the correct pitch is coming out. So the way I tune my alto saxophone, I will finger an F sharp note and play that with my normal embouchure, and it should read an A on my tuner. If it doesn't read an A on my tuner because it's too sharp or too flat, then I will push in or move out the mouthpiece on the neck, and that will bring it into tune. So I just keep on playing my F sharp note, moving and adjusting the mouthpiece until it gives me an A on the tuner, then I know it's tuned. So once the saxophone is tuned, the next thing that you want to do is to get the front E and the front F fingerings to sound. The good thing about it, if you can get these fingerings to sound, then you can use the same voicings for a lot of the lower altissimo notes. Now, when you try to play these notes with your normal voicings, the way your tongue position is and your throat positions that you use for your normal range, you're going to find that these notes do not sound. They come out as a low, husky type of pitch. So in order to get them to work, what you're going to need to do is to raise your tongue. Now, the way I kind of visualize it is when I whistle. When I whistle from a low pitch to a high pitch, my tongue starts off low, then it arches and it moves up and it moves forward towards my teeth. Now, if I put my tongue in a position as if I'm whistling a high note, but obviously you don't whistle in the saxophone, you just put your tongue in that position and blow through the saxophone, the note will come out. If it doesn't come out, it's still coming out as low, then raise your tongue a little higher and it should come out. Or experiment with your tongue and your throat position and it should come out. If for whatever reason it's coming out as a squeak or a very high note, then it's probable that you are biting on the reed, you're applying too much pressure. Usually what happens when we try to play altissimo notes, we get frustrated that the notes are not coming out, which naturally causes us to bite down or clamp down on the reed. If you clamp down on the reed, it's going to get you to a higher partial, or it's going to get you to one of these higher overtones, so it may cause you to squeak. So then just remember, you don't want to bite, you want to have a nice relaxed embouchure similar to what you usually use, and then that should get the pitch out. The other cause of squeaking might be that you're blowing too hard into the saxophone. Now, according to this book, the author tells us that when he recorded the air pressure, most of the saxophone players, or all of the saxophone players, when they played in the altissimo range, they used less air. So you don't need to blow harder to get these altissimo notes to come out. If you do, you're just going to distort the sound. Usually when people play altissimo notes and they want to change the altissimo note into a split tone, then they'll apply more pressure, more air pressure. So they're going to blow harder and that will change the altissimo note into a split tone. But you don't want to do that. So ease off on the air pressure and ease off on the clamping down on the reed, and you should get these notes to come out. Once you get the front E note to come out, then change it to the front F and see if that comes out. They both should work on the same voicings. Once you've done that, experiment with the position of your tongue. See how low you can lower your tongue and still get the note to come out. See how high you can raise your tongue and still get the note to come out, because that will give you two extremes. And then what that means is that whenever you play these notes, just make sure that your tongue is within these two extremes and the note will come out. Then once you know what these two extremes are, vary your tongue position within these two extremes and vary your voice box. Move it slightly up and lower it slightly and see what effect that has on the pitch. Does it make the pitch come out clearer? Does the pitch come out louder? Does it come out more in tune? If it does come out more in tune, then that's where you're aiming for your tongue to be every time that you play the note. So you're going to have to try and remember the position of your tongue and your throat to get those notes to come out just as you want them to come out. So once you can get the front E and the front F to sound, then try and play these notes by slowing from one to the other, slow from the E to the F and back to the E, or tongue them, and then try and play these notes from the previous notes. So start by palm D and then palm E flat, then move to the front E fingering and then to the front F fingering, and go back and forth to make sure that you can get these notes. You want to be able to do it with some consistency. When I started learning to play in the Altissimo range, I would get these front E and the front F note to sound, and at other times when I tried to play, it would come out as that low husky sound, so it wasn't consistent. And when it came out as a low sound, then I kind of realized that my tongue was not in the correct position. And so when I played it again with my tongue in the correct position, the note came out. So it's just a matter of remembering your tongue has got to be in that high position to get that front E and that front F to come out. And it will be the same position for a lot of the lower Altissimo notes. The next thing to do is to get yourself a finger chart, so you can start looking at some of these fingerings for these Altissimo notes. Now you've got to realize that some Altissimo fingerings will work better on some saxophones than others. So this is my Alto saxophone fingering chart, which I created from looking at various other finger charts that you find online. I played through various fingerings for the various notes and found out that these seem to be working for me at this particular moment in time of my development. So don't use my chart, create your own. Go through the various Altissimo fingerings that you can find online, play them, and then see if it works for you, if it's in tune, if it's easy to use, and if it is, put it as part of your fingering chart and then create your own fingering chart. Now, I will put in the description links to various channels that I've particularly found helpful. A lot of these channels will go through various fingerings for all of the different Altissimo notes, and with some explanation explaining why one fingering may be better than another and which one the particular presenter uses and why. So if you want to know certain channels that go through these Altissimo fingerings and demonstrate them with some explanation, then check in the description for the links there. So what you're basically going to do, you're going to get your finger chart, you're going to finger the Altissimo fingering, you're going to blow through the saxophone using the same voicing that you got for the front E and front F, and see if the Altissimo note comes out. If it doesn't, then adjust your voicing slightly, maybe adjust your tongue, maybe adjust your voice box slightly, and see if you can get these notes to come out. And they should come out with practice. Now, that should take you up to around Altissimo C, Altissimo D, and then getting higher than that may begin to create some problems for you. You may find that trying to get higher than a D is getting more and more difficult to get these notes, especially as you go to higher partials. Notes become, or the partials or the overtones come closer and closer together. So when you're trying to hit a particular note, you may find that you get a different note instead. So when you look at your tuner, if it's supposed to say E flat, you may find that the tuner is saying E or it's saying F. But again, you just got to have to manipulate your throat and your tongue and try and get it into tune. Now with the higher Altissimo notes, don't try and move your tongue higher and higher and higher and higher. As you get higher in the Altissimo, don't try and move your tongue higher and higher. You may think because when you whistle, your tongue gets higher and higher to get higher and higher notes, but that's not the way it works. Again, according to the recordings in this book, what basically happens for the low Altissimo notes, your tongue gets higher and higher, but a point comes when the tongue begins to descend. So to get these higher Altissimo notes, your tongue is going lower and lower. Your tongue is going forward, is getting closer and closer to the reed. It's also going underneath the reed. Now, just bear in mind that not everybody will play this way, but according to the research, most people play this way. So most people, when they get higher and higher Altissimo notes, their tongue moved closer to the reed, the tongue moved under the reed, and their tongue was a lot flatter than usual. The other important thing was the back of their throat. It kind of opened up. Now, when you try to get these high altissimo notes to sound, your brain will automatically open up the back of your throat. So you don't really need to worry so much about that. The way I kind of visualize it is, rather than whistling, think about humming. Now, when I hum a low note and then get it to go higher and higher, my tongue doesn't really raise higher and higher. My tongue kind of stays around about the same position. Well, what happens? The throat changes. I noticed that in the throat, there's a lot of something happening in the throat that is making the notes get higher and higher rather than moving the tongue. So when you're playing these higher and higher altissimo notes, just think about humming, putting your tongue in a lower position, moving forward, your tongue going underneath the reed, getting close to the reed, and then try and produce these higher altissimo notes, and the back of your throat will begin to open up because you're trying to get these higher altissimo notes. Your brain will send the signals to your muscles to open up to try and get these notes. Now, it's going to take some time and practice for you to get these higher altissimo notes to come out. There's not much anybody can actually say apart from keep on practicing to get them out. One thing I will say is that tone imagination is a great part to get these altissimo notes to come out. So if you read Siguard Rascher's book, he goes into about tone imagination quite a lot. What tone imagination is, you hear the note in your mind before you play it. If you can hear it in your mind, you kind of anticipate how it's supposed to sound. When you try to play it or vocalize it, your brain will make the natural adjustments for you to get these notes to come out. If you can't hear it in your mind, or you can't visualize it, or you can't sing it, then it's going to be more difficult for you to play it. Now, the easiest way to visualize it is either to hear it first. So get a tone generator, play the tone that you're trying to get, hear that sound, remember that sound, and then try and play that altissimo note. And because you're hearing the sound and it's in your mind, it's easier for you to get that sound to come out. The other way is to play the altissimo note that you're trying to sound at the end of a sequence, maybe like a scale. When you play a scale and you get to that seventh note, you can hear that the seventh note wants to resolve to the root. And you can actually, when you play the seventh note, you can hear in your mind the next note that's supposed to come, because the seventh note resolves to the root, and you can actually hear the root in your mind. And so if you're playing a scale, when you get to that seventh note, you're already anticipating what the next note should be. You're hearing it in your mind, so when you try to play it, it should come out. So either play a scale or an arpeggio ending on the note that you're trying to get, and that'll make it easier for you to get that note. Now, if you're trying to get these higher altissimo notes to come out and you just can't do it for whatever reason, you've tried every combination of your throat and your tongue and it's still not working, then you may need to try the systematic approach and train your muscles to get in certain positions in order to produce these notes. Now, having said that, I must confess that when I try to get these high altissimo notes to come out, playing on a softer reed, I did have difficulty trying to get them out. But when I tried with a harder reed, I was beginning to make a lot more progress. So you may want to consider changing the strength of your reed. Now, what I intend to do is to play these altissimo notes with a harder reed to try and get these notes to come out. And then once I could get them out with some consistency, then I'm going to try and play these altissimo notes with a softer reed. Because the problem is, if you play with a harder reed, then your lower notes will suffer. It's going to be more difficult for you to get a good sounding low note. And if you use a softer reed, the low notes will come out, but then when you try to get into the altissimo range, it might be difficult. So there might be a type of compromise. And I found using harder reeds, but certain brands of harder reeds, helped me. Not all of the harder reeds worked. So when I moved from a 2.5 to a 3, and I tried different types of brands with a strength 3, only certain brands helped me to get these altissimo notes to come out. But then that's me personally. For you, it might be something totally different. So let's look at the systematic approach. The first thing you're going to do is some mouthpiece exercises, or mouthpiece connected to the neck exercises. And what you're going to do, you're going to use your normal embouchure. You're going to blow into the mouthpiece, which will create a pitch. Now, the pitch that will come out of the mouthpiece will be dependent on various factors, depending on whether it's a bari mouthpiece, a tenor, a soprano, or alto mouthpiece, and it will differ depending on whether the mouthpiece has a high baffle, a low baffle, a small chamber, a large chamber, etc. So with an alto mouthpiece, if I blew into this, I might get a B or B flat or an A, one of those notes. But whatever note you get, that's your starting point. And what you're trying to do with your normal embouchure, you're going to blow that note, but then try and bend it down as far as you can. Now, if you can bend the pitch down a large interval, then when you play these altissimo notes, if the altissimo note is not in tune, then you can change the pitch by just moving your voice in. You can change the pitch so that it is in tune. Another thing you can do, instead of just starting with the starting pitch and then bending it down to see how far you can go and then bending it back up again, you could start with the starting pitch and then alternate between the starting pitch and descending half-tone intervals. So start with the starting pitch, then descend half-tone, then go back to the starting pitch, and then go down a tone, then the starting pitch, then go down 3 half-tones, etc. You could use a tuner and a piano to make sure that when you jump these intervals that they are in tune. The next test that we're going to do is very similar, but instead of just using the mouthpiece or the mouthpiece and the neck, what we're going to use is the whole saxophone. We're going to finger the front F and we're going to try and bend that down as low as we can and then bend it back up. The goal here is trying to get down lower and lower each time to try and increase the interval. Donald Sinta in his book calls this the front F trick. The next thing you're going to do is some countless overtone exercises. Now, if you don't know what an overtone is or how to produce an overtone, I have created a detailed video on overtones, so you might want to watch that, which will tell you what is an overtone and how to produce the various overtones with some examples. When we finger any note on the saxophone, that note becomes the fundamental, and we can play that note and certain other notes above that note that form part of the harmonic series based upon acoustic properties of the saxophone. When people talk about overblowing a note, what they mean is that by fingering a note, they can play other notes, maybe a 6 above or even higher, by simply changing their voicings. This concept is used in playing altissimo notes. For example, the palm key fingerings may be used for sounding several notes into the altissimo range. Now, when practicing overtones, we finger the lowest notes of the saxophone, starting from low B flat, and we try to play the notes of the harmonic series by simply changing our voicings. So here's the harmonic series for low B, and a professional will be able to play all these notes without changing the fingerings, but by merely changing their voicings. So to start, what we can do is finger a low note and play that note, then voice the note an octave above, which is the first overtone, by changing our voicings only, and then sound the note at its normal pitch again. Next, we can progress to the other overtones. Then we can play these overtones in different sequences, which will get us used to forming these voicings. We could even start by removing the saxophone from our mouths and reinserting it before playing a particular overtone. This will get us used to developing our voicings from scratch. If we get experience at playing these higher overtones, then when it comes time to sounding these notes with altissimo fingerings, it will be easier. Next, we can finger an ascending or descending chromatic scale, but sound the notes of the first overtones or second overtones. Some of the notes may be difficult to produce, and you may need some venting of other keys to sustain them. Next, we can play some songs comprising of overtones, such as the bugle call, or we can change songs that we already know by replacing certain notes with their equivalent overtones. We can work out what fundamental notes to use from the harmonic series charts. We can find lots of overtone exercises and melodies in the various recommended books on overtones and altissimo playing. The last thing you're going to practice is what some people call undertones, which is the opposite of overtones. So here what you're going to do, you're going to press the octave key, you're going to finger a note, but instead of playing that particular note with the octave key pressed, you're going to sound the note an octave below. So it's as if the octave key was not working. So maybe you play an F with the octave key, but instead of it coming out as that higher pitch, you open up your throat, you change the voicings inside of your mouth and let it sound the octave below. Now doing this is very difficult. It means you're really having to open up your throat and inside of your mouth to make it sound lower, as if the octave key is not working. I haven't seen many videos of people actually doing it, though it is an exercise laid out in various textbooks. But here is Dave Liebman showing you how it is done. Well, lastly, let me say thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you found something informative and interesting, something that's going to help you in your quest for playing in the altissimo range. So don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to check out the information in the description. There I'll make a list of the various books, recommended books that you should read, and how you may possibly view those books online for free. I'll also make a list of various channels that you can go to find out the different fingerings for the altissimo notes when you create your own altissimo chart. Also, it'd be good to hear from you, so leave a comment if you've got any tips that you found helpful in playing in the altissimo range, or if there's anything that you'd like to query, or if there's anything that you disagree with what I've said in this video, then obviously leave a comment and we can discuss it. Once again, thank you for watching, and I shall see you soon. Bye-bye.